Well, good afternoon, everybody. It looks like we're ticking up around 70 or so right now, and it's still ticking up. Welcome to another edition of the Insights Over the Lunch Hour with the executive staff here at the council. We appreciate you, everybody, taking your time out of the day and registering and joining us for this. Um, Kind of the way it'll work is we've got executive staff here. I actually promised you guys pretty much all the executive staff, and I didn't realize that I was setting this thing for the week of spring break. So Patrick, our GC, I had already signed his leave, so he's off on spring break, and stupid me went and set this thing. So you don't get Patrick, but in exchange for that, I will gladly refund your ticket, your purchase price for what you paid for this presentation today. So if you've got any questions, tough luck. Any gripes or complaints about it, tough luck. I don't care. But you still get all of us, and we'll do the best we can to fill it in his stead. So right now, it looks like we're up to over 160 people watching, so that's a pretty good turnout. So the way we'll kind of work this today is we've got a list of rule changes and just some other general topics that the council and the member boards have tackled since about August of last year that we want to give everybody an update on and just kind of give you our perspective on. And then we're going to leave a lot of time for you guys to ask us questions. Uh, Now, one thing we won't be we won't be taking questions on is if you got Lord knows why you would ask if you had a pending complaint, but don't ask about that because we're not going to talk about that. And then we're not going to talk about any pending applications. This is not that kind of an interaction. But other than that, you are free to ask us anything you want, whether it's our favorite color or what we think is going to happen over the legislature next session. I don't care. You ask it. If we can answer it, we will. If we can't, one thing I always used to tell my clients in private practice is I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. And just because we work for the state and the agency, that doesn't mean we know everything, I can assure you. So we may have to tell you, I don't know. But kind of with that, I also want to make a couple of plugs real quick since we've got such a large audience here. We've got 177 people online. I got a couple of plugs I want to make, some things I want to ask of y'all out there. Um, we're kind of like the Marines. We're always looking for a few good men and women. We don't want everybody. We just want a few good ones. And so if you've ever considered serving on any one of these boards, what I would ask you to do is go over to the governor's appointments webpage and take a look at the applications process. It's not complicated, it's not convoluted. But if you've ever thought about serving or you ever wondered what it was like, fill out an application. Just throw your name in the hat for consideration is what I would ask. Um, Working for state agencies, you don't get paid for it. So it's certainly not the money that draws people here. You're going to have a servant's heart if you're going to want to do this. But if you ever wanted a chance to, I'm not saying you don't make it in your own practice, but if you ever wanted to make a difference, uh, serving others through government or what have you, it's a good way to do it. And we really try to not burden you down with homework and a lot of excess work. While serving on the board now, if you're selected to serve as a chair or you get on the council, it's going to be a lot more work. I'm not going to lie to you, but we try to keep, service on the board is something that's manageable that you can kind of give of your free time. But if it's ever something you've considered or thought you'd be interested in, I'd really encourage you to go over there and fill out an application and submit that to Governor Abbott's appointments office because we it's better to have a large pool of people to draw from than no pool or a small pool. So just take a look at that. You're not required to do it, but um, I'd really encourage you because I really do think you'd enjoy it. I know we've probably got some board members on here today. They're like, he's a liar. It's terrible, but they're not talking. I am. So I think you'd enjoy it. But anyway, just take a moment to go over and check that out. And then also at the end of this, you're going to get just a little 3-question survey that asks if you found it helpful, would you recommend it to a colleague? But the one thing I'm really particularly interested in, if there's a topic or something that you guys want to see us talk about in the future, fill that out. Or during the comments when we open it up for Q&A later on, tell us what you want tell us what you want to hear us talk about. Because that's something we can certainly, accommodate as long as it's not like an application or a complaint, that type of thing. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, I did something a little different this time. Rather than just talking about the rules and showing them on screen, I tried to send out the actual documents that we're going to be looking at here today. I went and I grabbed everybody that had registered through about, noon yesterday, grabbed all your email addresses, and I blasted out an email with a link to the materials that we're using here today. So if you got it, great. If you didn't get it, it's probably because your email service provider filtered out my email for whatever reason. But we're trying to make this a little bit easier so that you can read along at home as we're going. But I'll still share my screen. It's a lot easier when you have it on your own, and you're not beholden to me to scroll up and down. So with that, I'm going to get started. Let me see if I can share my screen here. I want number 3. Okay, so the first rule, I'm going to handle all the BHEC rules, but the first rule I want to talk to you all about is 882.23. Now, this was this rule change. It was adopted at the last BHEC meeting on February 20th. This is a pretty significant change because up until this, the way we viewed the requirement for licensure in Texas was if you, the provider or the recipient of services, were located in Texas, independent of one another, if either one of them were in Texas, you had to have a license in Texas. Now, what kind of brought this rule changes that. And this rule now says if the recipient of services in Texas, you have to have a license in Texas. So if the recipient of services, if there's a Texan and they are on vacation in Virginia, you don't have to have a Texas license to treat that person. The reason this came up was, I'll give you an example of how it would work. The way it came up was, I think it was Hurricane Ida is what hit Louisiana. It was, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago now when Ida hit, I believe. And when it did, it flooded basically the lower half of Louisiana. And there were a lot of mental health providers, social workers in particular, that got displaced. They were refugees for a short period of time in Texas until the state dried out. The problem is they were calling us and asking, hey, can I still treat my patients back home? I'm not going to treat anybody here in Texas. I'm not going to mess with Texans, but I want to be able to treat my folks back home. And I was like, no, you cannot unless you've got a Texas license, because you are situated in Texas. You're in our sandbox, and you got to have a license. And that doesn't make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. And because if they're harmed, that's a Louisianan. Uh, the person was only here temporarily. They weren't here permanently. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to have to exercise police power on that individual when really probably Louisiana was better situated. If they were harmed, if that patient was harmed, they were more likely to seek redress through the Louisiana board than they were through us anyway. So that was kind of the mentality. Now, so again, what this rule change does is it says we are looking at, if the recipient of services is in Texas, then you have to have a Texas license. Now, what is this? Apart from that Louisiana example I gave you, what do you do if you've got a provider who comes here from Hawaii and he's on vacation, or you just got somebody who comes here and they're visiting with mom and dad, or having to take care of mom and dad for a while, but they want to keep their practice going back wherever, Wisconsin, New York, wherever. They can do it, and they don't need a Texas license as long as they're only treating patients in their home state. Because again, if they hurt a New Yorker, they hurt I don't even know what you'd call a Wisconsinian. I don't know. Somebody help me out in the comments there, however you would say that. But if you hurt somebody up there, that's that state's that's their problem. Not to be callous about it, but that's their problem, not ours. And so that's kind of the mentality behind that. But that's a big rule change. Candidly, it's not. Yeah.
Pardon the interruption, Daryl, but you're displaying 885, the fees. Did you intend to display 882?
Yes, I did. There we go. Okay. See, that's why we have Sarah here, so that she can go, hey, idiot, you got the wrong rule up. This is what happens when Patrick leaves. The wheels fall off the wagon. But sorry about that, guys. There it is. But that's 882. And you can see that really the changes in the rule aren't that much. The wording changes aren't much, but they have a very significant impact on what they do. Now, F looks like a new, to everybody out there, if you've ever looked at that rule, and I hope everybody has, but if you haven't, F will look like a wholly new provision. It's not. that's actually a recantation of a statutory requirement. There's actually a statute in the occupations code that's not in any of our operating chapters. It's not in 507, 501, 502, 503, or 505 of the occupations code. It's in a different section of the occupations code. So what it's in kind of an out of the way place. So what we did is we adopted it in the rule so that everybody would see it and you would know it exists. It basically says you can use the internet to practice in another state, but you're going to be subject to the other state's licensing laws. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then of course we've developed a pretty comprehensive definition for what client means, so that it will help you determine whether a client is located in this state, because this rule has to cover everything from what you traditionally think of in terms of therapy, counseling, individual type counseling, all the way up to forensic practice. What if you're interviewing a collateral witness for a child custody evaluation? You're in North Carolina, the provider's in North Carolina, but the collateral witness is here. Does that fall under this? So that's what that definition, that's why it's so long. It has to encompass the entire scope of y'all's practice, and that's not an easy thing to do. So because all the licensees under BHEC have a kind of a generic license, and it's just a very wide scope. So that's why that rule is as long as it is. But there it is. It's probably not going to affect, candidly, all of you licensees that are watching here. You're not really going to have to worry about this. You're already licensed. So this is really only for folks who are needing, who are a refugee here, vacationing here, and they're like, do I need to get a license here to treat folks back home? No, you don't. That's really the target audience of this. It is not you folks who are licensees, but now kind of like that old NBC, the more you know, commercial. The next item up is going to be 882.28, and this is the update to degree on license. This was something that was initiated by the LPC board. Long story short, what it's designed to do is if you were issued a license with a master's degree or say a specialist degree, and you want to change, and you've since acquired a doctoral degree, and you want your license to reflect that higher level of licensure, you can now submit an application through our online system, and we will reissue, assuming that degree would qualify you for the license initially, we will reissue the license with the new degree qualifier on it. That's really all this rule does. Now, I will tell y'all, there was a lot of debate about whether or not we should even be doing this, because honestly, it is it's of little regulatory value to us. In other words, it doesn't really help us regulate the professions. It is something that is more advantageous for you guys as the providers. That being said, what we have talked about at the council level and what I'm telling you all here right now is once this goes live, it's not live in our database system yet, but once it does, these will not receive priority when you apply for that. I'm going to tell you right now, don't email me, don't complain about, well, I did this, a week ago and I still haven't heard anything. My job is to get people licensed and to police the existing licensees. It is not it is because the council says it is, but it is not a priority of mine to reissue a license with a new degree qualifier on it. I do that as I have time. Staff will do that as they have time, but I'm not going to sacrifice minting and producing actual licensees to meet workforce shortages in order to change the degree qualifier on a license. So understand, we'll get to it, and I don't mean this to sound cheeky or anything, but we'll get to it when we get to it. I've got to prioritize my resources towards actually getting folks licensed and not this kind of stuff. But I understand it will provide some advantage for folks, and so we want to make sure we do that. But we can't sacrifice the core functions of the agency for this. Hang on, I'm having to resize a window here so I can fit everybody in it. Okay, so that's 882.28. And I know probably people are asking, like, when is that going to go live on the database? I don't yet know because we're in what's called a configuration freeze right now. We have a shared database that multiple agencies use, and that database, we're actually onboarding some new agencies into it, and we're onboarding another. Basically, the anatomical board has now been merged with the Texas Funeral Services Commission. So all of that stuff has to be aggregated in this database. And when you do it, they have to put a freeze on the database so that we can't make any changes to it while they import all that stuff. It's a bunch of computer nerd stuff speak to say that we can't do anything right now. It's ready to go. The rule is we just got to wait for the config freeze to unfreeze, to thaw out, and then we can move forward with it. Now, I will tell you, it's only going to apply to MFTs and LPCs right now. I don't think we're go live for social workers, and certainly not for psychology. Psychology is a little bit different animal. I'm not sure how that would even work out in psychology, but anyway, primarily it's meant for LPCs and MFTs right now. Eventually, we may expand it to social work, but there's social work psychology got some baggage there that it's going to take us a little while to work through to see if it would even work in those programs. The next one is going to be 882.32. This is the duty to update your name and address. No, it's a very subtle change, but let me tell you why we're making it. With the passage of Senate Bill 510, which is a law that says we can't give out your home address, email address, it basically locks down your professional file. Your professional file is no longer public information. So we just have to make sure that we put it in the rule that, hey, we will not, your search results in the online, it's not going to display your home address. All this other stuff that Senate Bill 510 says we have to keep secret. It's not really anything. It's not operative to any of you. It's just something that the agency has to do, and we want to make sure our rules reflect what we can and we cannot display in those search results. So again, it's not really anything you guys have to worry about, but just take some comfort in knowing that the rule says what we will and what we won't hand out in our public search results. I will say one of the benefits to everybody out there in viewership land is prior to Senate Bill 510, if somebody submitted a public information request on your professional file or your licensing file with us, they literally got everything in your file except for your social security number. And sometimes I would fudge a little bit and hide the date of birth. But that was, if push come to shove, I'd probably lose on that. But now with the passage of Senate Bill 510, I think it was Senator Perry that out of Lubbock that passed that. With passage of Senate Bill 510, all that stuff is confidential. It's no longer public record, which is good for us too, because it means we don't have to be a record repository for the world, because we did get quite a few requests for y'all's professional files, and it wasn't coming from y'all. It was other people that were asking for it. So I think probably that was a good move. I certainly like it now that they've changed that law. But whether you do or not, there it is. That's a change in the rules. Next item up is going to be 882.61. This is our military, basically our military licensing rule under BHIC. It's an incredibly complicated rule. It's very complex. Here it is in a nutshell. And what we've had to do is we've had to marry state law with federal law. And they say similar things, but they operate a little bit different. Basically, if you are a service member or the spouse of a service member and your duty station gets changed to Texas, you can basically come to Texas and just let us know, hey, I'm licensed in West Virginia, in good standing. And once we've confirmed that, we give you a thumbs up. You don't need a license to practice here. You can get a temporary, kind of a quasi-temporary license if you want, but you don't need it. Under federal law, you can just start practicing under your West Virginia license once we've given you the thumbs up. And there is no end date. So, if you're stationed here for 20 years, you could practice here the entire 20 years really without the license if you needed to. Now, you're going to have all kinds of problems billing insurance on that. The law is designed to include both servicemen and women and their spouses, but I sometimes struggle with, I don't even know why a service member would ever need this, because they're practicing in an exempt setting to begin with. So I'm not even sure how this would ever come into play for them. It's typically going to be the spouses who are going to need something like this, but just be aware that this law is out there. If you are a service, a military spouse, or somebody who's looking to come to Texas, there is an avenue for them to come practice without having to get a license. I still recommend that you go ahead and get the license because it opens up a whole lot of avenues for being paneled on insurance and that kind of stuff. But it is your call. You don't necessarily have to. You can get one of these temporary licenses, or you can practice for a little while, or practice so long as your spouse is stationed here without a license. But you still have to report to us and tell us what you're doing, and then we have to give you a green light. You can't just show up and start practicing. That's not how it works. So that's out there. Like I say, it's a really, really complicated rule. Trying to marry federal law and state law is never easy. 883.1 is the next BHEC rule. This is a product of our recent audit from the state auditor's office. The SAO, the state auditor's office, they came back and said, hey, you're supposed to be looking at NPDB reports for all your licensees when they renew. Well, there's 83,000 of you. There's no way we can look at NPDB reports from all of you. And so, I mean, it would take my entire staff. We'd have to work 20, every day. That's all we'd be looking at. So what we did is we kind of came up with a compromise that said, all right, if you're selected for an audit, you're going to have to submit an NPDB report, and we'll take a look at it then to see if you've been naughty and gotten in trouble in another jurisdiction. Because we're already checking to see if you were naughty when you apply for licensure with us. But NPDB reports are snapshots in time. They're not like the RAPBAC program where if you get arrested for streaking in Virginia, we're going to know about it through the RAPBAC program. NPDB doesn't work that way. It's just a single snapshot in time. So if you get selected for an audit, just know you're now going to have to submit an NPDB self-query report. It's easy to do. We've got instructions in the letter on how to do it. I promise it is not complicated. And you can submit it it's a PDF that all you do is you'll just email it in to us or mail it in, however you want to send stuff. It's a very easy process to do. We just need to see it so that we know if you've hidden something from us, you got in trouble, then yeah, you're going to be in trouble. If you haven't told us about getting in trouble in West Virginia or what have you. But beyond that, it is very simple to comply with. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. Next item, and I need to hurry because I don't want to. I'm hogging all the time here. Timeliness of complaints. We changed this rule just so that if your license expires while you have a pending complaint and we lose jurisdiction, we don't want limitations running. We don't want limitations to run out, or you waiting till limitations run out and then reapply under the reinstatement rule and say, well, I didn't have any disciplinary action and you can't reopen that complaint because limitations is run. So this rule was changed to negate that type of an argument. It keeps bad people from gaming the system is what it does. That's really the effect of that rule. And let's see, looks like, okay. And the last one is we've made some changes to the fee rule. The first thing I want to point out is if you pay us money to do a renewal or something like that, you can't be cheeky and cute and then go do a chargeback on your card and claw that money back from us and not expect a consequence. So, if that was ever in the realm of your thoughts that you wanted to do, don't do it because we are opening complaints on people for doing that. It's a way to kind of cheat us out of the fees is what it is. And we're just making it very clear in this rule now that there will be a disciplinary consequence if you want to do that, engage in that kind of chicanery. So that's the primary thing. And then the rule also, it also creates the fee for the application if you want to change the degree qualifier on your license. That's going to be a $54 fee to do that. So that's also in there. So that's it with regard to BHEX rules. I guess, Diane, you're up next on Sci. I'll turn it over to you. If I can figure out how to stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, I'll share my screen here. Okay. All right, great. So for psychology, the rules update that we have for you guys are the licensed psychological associates. We modified, made amendments to this rule to allow LSSPs to a bridge to become an LPA. So in A2, it just clarifies that the internship practicum can count towards the supervision, towards the licensure requirements for supervised experience. In addition to being supervised by a licensed psychologist, we will also accept supervision from a licensed specialist in school psychology. Under C5, it was amended to allow the provisionally licensed psychologist to count supervision towards the independent practice requirements as an LPA. In Part D, we did a deletion of the GAT rule to correspond with some other changes that were in another rule for 46311. Part F, it extends the grandfathering provision for degrees in psychologies that began before August 31st, 2019. And in Part G, it created a path for applicants to petition to remedy their deficiencies so they could work towards their licensure as a LPA. Our other rule that we have is 463.9, which deals with licensed specialists in school psychology, and amendments that were recently adopted here. In Part 3, it will allow applicants in other states to provide school psychological services or applicants with graduate degrees in related disciplines to psychology to be eligible for the LSSP license. So the highlights of that is applicant must hold a certificate of completion from a graduate level training program designed to train individuals from related disciplines in the practice of school psychology, or applicant's graduate degree in a discipline related to psychology must be obtained from a regionally accredited institution of higher education. And applicants are required to meet the coursework requirements, exams, and internships that we set forth for any individual looking to become a licensed specialist in school psychologist. But we have an emphasis that we changed our rule to make sure that it's a school-based assessment, a school-based intervention, and a school-based practicum. And lastly, applicants must be licensed, certified, or registered and in good standing to practice school psychology in another jurisdiction. So we're hoping that these modifications or amendments to these rules will allow other LPAs or LSSPs to come to Texas as a bridge to meet our requirements, so we can help get more practitioners in our rural areas. And that completes the psychology update. Thank you. Let's see, I have to stop sharing.
All right, thanks, Diane. You
You're welcome.
made it all fancy with a PowerPoint, and here I am just slapsticking Word documents and the wrong ones at that. All right, Sarah, I think you're up.
So for the marriage and family therapy rules, they'll be published in the March 22nd Texas Register and become effective on March 27th. The first one up is the 801.2 definitions. We included a definition for independent practice. So that's practice that does not require supervision by an LMFT supervisor. In 801.48, record keeping, we clarified that a person who has their own private practice rather than independent practice must establish a plan of custody and control for the licensee's client mental health records. So there was some confusion about between independent and private. Some people use that word interchangeably, but we do want the associate who owns their own private practice to have a plan for custody and control of the client records. In 801.142, everyone will be happy to know that effective March 27th, An associate may count up to 750 technology-assisted services hours toward the total of 1,500 direct clinical services hours. And in 801.143, D as in dog, this establishes a requirement that the supervisor must include in their file for the associate's supervised experience an established plan of custody and control of the records for each associate's supervised experience. We've had tragically a number of associates call us in distress because their supervisor who was suddenly unable to assist them either with injury or illness, or in some cases, an unexpected sudden death. And the supervisee, the associate, had no idea where to go to get their supervision records and to proceed with their pursuit of licensure. So this is to try to help smooth that transition should it be needed. Also, you'll note in subsection F as in Fox, the limit of 12 supervisees per supervisor has been removed, the specific number, but that still requires that the supervisor provide adequate supervision. So it relies on the supervisor to understand their workload and what is required for adequate supervision, and to only supervise the number of individuals appropriately. In 801.305, this is a second time for this submission. We had an error when we submitted the chart for the level of sanctions. So we proposed a revised chart on August 5th, but we submitted an outdated chart and it was published as adopted on November 18th. So we're correcting that error here. And I've just provided for you in this display just a sample of the chart so you can see how it goes. There were some substantive changes to the chart as well back in August, as well as to 801.302, which reduced the category of sanction levels from 5 categories to 4, like you see here. There were previously 2 suspension levels or categories. One was a short-term suspension and the other one was a long-term. So this simplifies things somewhat. And the other changes to the chart were to realign changes in rules that change the designation. For example, if we changed 801.43 B and added another section, then we'd have to redesignate C as D and D as E, etc. So some of those were updated in August as well as in this chart as well. And that concludes the update for the marriage and family therapy rules.
I do believe, Christina, that brings us to you.
Correct. All right, thank you everyone for being here. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. I don't have a fancy thing like Diane did or Sarah all in one, but a couple of them I will be showing y'all. A lot of what the LPC board did was kind of clean up and moving some of the rules to other areas. So the first one that I'll share with you all, and let me share my screen. Ugh. Oh gosh, screen. Here we go. Okay, so you all should be seeing the board rules 681.35 for informed consent. So we moved the rules related to informed consent from 681.41, and we moved them here to its own rule under 681.35. And under D, as in David, this is going to be the new language where it kind of clarifies for licensees who work at agencies or institutions where it can be more challenging to get signed informed consents. This new rule maintains the client protection and the notification standard for the licensee. So if they work at the agency or institution, they're not required to get the signed informed consent from the client, but they must write down that they informed the client and spoke with the client about everything that's outlined under A in this section. So again, there's lots of information there that they would still need to make sure they go over with the client, and the client has to agree to it. The next rule is related to 681.36 for client records. Again, it's a rule that was previously under some of the language was previously under 681.41, moved it over to the 681.36 for client records. The biggest part on this one is just clarifying that the records must be maintained by the licensee unless the records are maintained by the employer. So that's a big one that people just need to keep in mind for that one. A quick one. So I'm not going to show you 681.37 for billing and financial arrangements. It's basically just clean up from 681.41, moving it to the 681.37, making it easier to locate those rules for licensees. Same thing under 681.38 under conflicts, boundaries, dual relationship, and termination of relationships, moving some of the language that was in 41 and moving it here to this 681.38 rule. And same thing for 681.41. It's basically we pulled a bunch of stuff that might not be the best place for it, put it in its own rules. And then under U for 681.41, we completely removed that as it was duplicative language. It was in another rule under 681.45. And same one. So we also had that for 681.52 under parenting facilitation. Same thing, took the language from 41 and put it specifically in its own under 681.52. And the last one I wanted to show you all is related to required application materials. So the board has removed the 5-year expiration date of the exam. So if anyone's ever passed the exam in the past, we'll accept that score. Now, please keep in mind, because I've already received some phone calls and even from NBCC, the exam is still a requirement to be licensed in Texas. It's just removing the expiration date for that exam. And then lastly, we have a schedule of sanctions under 205. I wasn't going to show you all that one just because with that one, it's just updating what needed to be changed from the dates, from the rule numbers that we updated. So there's no change in action levels or anything. It was just rule numbers. And let's see if I can get out of this. Oh dear, I can't see my screen. Daryl, are you able to get me out of the share screen? Oh dear, let me try. Thank you.
There you go. So for social work rules, these two will be published on the March 22nd Texas Register and become effective on March 27th. The first one is 781.404, and it clarifies the fee arrangements that are allowed between a supervisor and a supervisee. Basically, what we want to avoid is the supervisor double dipping, if you will, and getting paid from an employer and also getting paid by the supervisee. So we were just clarifying language there, not really changing anything. In 781.412, this essentially removes the 2-year shelf life that's placed on the passing score of an ASWB examination for licensure. And as Christina noted, the exam is still required. It's just that the passing score doesn't expire or become invalid after 2 years. If you happen to apply after that 2-year period now, staff can still accept that passing score. In 781.501, and I hope I hear cheers out in the audience as well for this one. This is the continuing education requirement. And now field instructors can again claim CE credit for providing field instruction to social work students. They may claim 1 hour of continuing education credit for each hour that the college or the university awards the student for that instruction, up to 10 hours per renewal period. And note that this continuing education credit cannot be counted toward either ethics or the cultural diversity or competency requirements. And that's it for, I think that's it for the social work. Rule update is complete. So back to Daryl.
All right. Thank y'all. The next item that I've got that I want to cover is, you know, I feel like it'll be very popular with everybody, but you know, in kind of looking at our customer service responses, I know in our strategic planning survey responses, which we do look at those things. I promise you guys we do. One of the things I've noticed is licensees sometimes struggle with, or they get frustrated by, well, we don't ever receive a confirmation if our renewal is successful or if our license was successfully renewed. We've now changed that. And I'll tell y'all, I got to give kudos, and y'all should all throw up a big thank you if you ever see her or get a chance to Jennifer Nowak, our CFO. She's also kind of our database guru. She manages the money and she manages the database too, a little bit from the agency side. So she's got a wide array of duties. But Jenny figured out how to do a confirmation email so that if you're in renewing a license, if it's successfully renewed, you now get a confirmation email. Not only does it send you an email, but there's also a letter to the same effect that gets put in your secure mailbox in the online licensing system. So you get notified in 2 different ways. So from this point forward, when you renew your license, if you don't get an email from us, check your spam email first, because we see a lot of problems with emails coming from our database system going into the licensee spam or junk folder. So make sure you check that. But if you don't, you may log into the online system and see in your mailbox whether or not you got a message saying, and it'll be a letter from us saying, hey, congrats that you successfully renewed. If you don't get either one of those, then that means you didn't successfully renew and you got something missing. Or if you're under audit, you're not going to get that, because that's handled in a different way. But anyway, just an FYI, that's a change we've made. I know those changes. I know stuff like that. It would matter to me if I were in y'all's shoes. So I just wanted to let everybody know. There's an example of what the emails look like in the materials that I sent out to you guys, so you can actually see what it looks like. It was an actual email that we sent to a licensee. The next thing we're going to talk about is strat planning and quadrennial rule review. And when we do that, I'm going to introduce you guys to a new member of the BHEC team. We got very lucky. And y'all really don't know how lucky you are that we got this guy. As a licensee, y'all benefit from this guy just as much as we do. But I don't know where he's at on your screen. He's in the lower right-hand corner, but Mr. Robert Romig down here is our new Deputy Executive Director. Robert comes to us from the Sunset Advisory Commission. Robert was actually the policy analyst that helped create BHEC. So I don't know, you can't throw rocks at him because this is a virtual. So if you're mad at him, too bad. You don't get to hit him and you don't get to throw anything at him. But I promise you, regardless of how you felt about him back then, you better like him now, because he's on our side now. And it's one of those deals where I'd rather have him fighting with us than against us. So I just want everybody to kind of welcome Mr. Romig, and he's going to update us on the strat planning and the quadrennial rule review, both of which are massive undertakings. So Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate the kudos, and I'm excited to join BHEC. So, and even with being thrown in the deep end with rule review and strategic planning right away, I think it's going to be, it's been fun already, getting back up to speed and learning all the rules and regulations, and do some more. So yeah, we have, y'all have already, as a licensing group, sent in over 500 responses to our strategic planning survey. And I've been reading every single one and am very appreciative of the comments and the thoughts. The overall timeline and plan for our strategic plan, they are due generally around June 1st. And so we are taking those survey responses, we're looking at them this month, and then during the month of April, I think we will be as staff working up our vision for the strategic plan and working all of those ideas for short and long-term planning into a draft, and then we will be getting board input during May and getting that out to folks published in June. But to just give you a sort of a precursor of what we are hearing and seeing from your responses in the strategic plan survey, some of the big topics that you will not be surprised to hear are the focus of you and your fellow licensees, reciprocity and mobility. Obviously, in the changing world we live in, people are moving around a lot more, and we've already had questions today answering about, well, what if I am taking an extended vacation in some other state? What if I want to live in a different state but continue to work here in Texas or work in multiple states? Certainly, we are aiming toward facilitating that as best we can. I know there's some questions about the counselor compact and other compacts, and that is something for the legislature to consider. And certainly where we have barriers, we are looking at those and trying to make those more flexible. Telehealth is another one, both working across states, but also within the state, using the new technology that is available, questions about AI, questions about supervision through telehealth services, through virtual meetings. That is, I think we are all past COVID enough to be much more versant in virtual meetings, and now the expansion of that use is coming under question of what are the new tools that we can use at our disposal to be better at our work and to make our work more facilitated and across geographic distances. Other things that you are noting that are huge issues for y'all that are absolutely something we will keep aware of: insurance reimbursements, general pay and cost issues, the incredible financial burden that you undertake being a mental health provider, the increased demand for your services, whether in private practice, in schools, in government services. Incredible increases in demand. And so some of those things we, of course, don't pull the levers of government in that way to address, but we can keep them on our radar. But we're also mindful of the ones that you're giving to us that we can address. So access to our staff when you have questions for things like this kind of virtual meeting and town hall, for you to be able to speak directly to us and get advice. We will continue to try to provide those opportunities as often and as well as we can, but also providing web services and easier processes for you to engage so that you don't have to talk to us, so that the rules are clear, they're understandable, the applications are easy to do, the processes, everywhere we can find ways to streamline and make those processes easier, we will do so. And then lastly, I just want to say we are very mindful, many comments about both in going two directions, either wanting there to be more flexible options to meet licensing requirements while also wanting to uphold professional standards. And matching those two is always on our mind, to make sure that we are making processes easy and flexible and accounting for real world situations that may not always match up exactly as our rules say, while upholding a strong professional standard so that we are protecting you and protecting the public. So all of those things are on our mind in our strategic plan. And so happy to answer any questions y'all have about it, or please reach out to me if you have if you didn't take the survey, but if you have thoughts, if you want to share ideas, please feel free to reach out. Sort of hand in hand to that is the quadrennial rule review. It's not really the strategic planning, but as you know, so much of what you do and what we do is driven by our rules. And so we are working on a process of rule review. I will try to share my screen. So you can see this rollout sheet.
So the public knows the state issues its employees laptops with 7.5-inch screens. That's why it's so hard to find the stop sharing button. It's basically an iPhone is what we get issued.
So we have already begun the internal work of doing our 4-year rule review. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the state law requires every agency to look at all of its rules every 4 years and ask the question, is this rule necessary? Is it supported by law and is it required to exist? And so we have started that process, and in general terms, you've got this document that sort of lays out the process, but between now and April, May, we as staff will be doing a deep dive of all of our rules and highlighting things that we see, that we have heard complaints about, that we have heard problems about, and generating a list of things that need attention. Starting in June, we will publish a formal notice of the rule review to start seeking public comment. And that public comment will be in two regards. In one way, at each of the board meetings in the June-July timeframe, we will lay out for the boards and for the public the things that we have identified, and we will want to get your feedback on those things. In addition, anything that we didn't identify that you think should be on our list of rules that need attention, we will also love to get any feedback on that. That will include in the July-August timeframe, there will be some town hall style meetings, one for each of the subject matter boards. It will be just like this. It will be virtual. I think there may be we haven't decided yet whether there will be an in-person version because most of you prefer these virtual settings. But that will be a time if you, for whatever reason, don't like written comments or don't want to send me an email, that you can come and voice concerns or thoughts about the rules. Ultimately, what we're working toward is in the September-October timeframe, for each of the subject matter boards and for the council, we will present a sort of final list of the findings and proposals for the rule review. Now, very importantly, these will not be the rule proposals. We will not jump straight to changing the rules at that moment, because we want to give everyone fair notice before we change anything. And so what we will instead be doing is at that October meeting of the council, we will have a list of the things that we believe must be repealed because they're no longer statutorily valid. We anticipate that will be a short list. And otherwise, we will have a set of proposals that we will then start conducting rule proposals on going forward. And so starting in October, moving into the next year, we will then take each piece that has been identified for change and we will publish a regular rule proposal in the register that you've seen before. You will have another opportunity to comment on that specific idea, that specific change, and it'll go through the normal process before amending any rules. So we're really trying to prioritize getting lots of input on the front end so that nobody is surprised when anything changes and has opportunity to comment. So that is in a very high level nutshell what the rule review process should look like. Certainly happy to answer any questions you might have if you want to put them in the Q&A, and again, feel free to reach out. I'm very excited to be here at BHEC, and so I'm excited to answer your questions.
Thanks, Robert. The only thing I can say is I'm glad you're spearheading all that and not me. That's what I would say. The next item up on our agenda that I want to talk about, and I've got to kind of hustle because we're now approaching the 1 o'clock hour, but I wanted to give everybody time for Q&A. The EPPP. Now, kind of where we're at. If you're in the psychology field, I don't know how many of you are out there watching, but I've included a kind of a cheat sheet in the materials for today, and with links to the various psychology board meetings where we have discussed the EPPP Part 2. Basically, in summary, ASPPB, which owns the EPPP, is now mandating that all boards adopt both Part 1 and Part 2 to the EPPP. Part 1 is the knowledge-based exam. Part 2 is the skills-based exam. That's the new part. And they're saying, if you want to keep using Part 1, you also have to adopt Part 2. Well, there's a lot of issues and a lot of concerns with whether or not we can even adopt Part 2, much less whether it's a good idea or whether it is needed. So the psychology board is currently undertaking a pretty big investigation and outreach effort to try and talk and visit with ASPPB about some of the concerns that both stakeholders, many of you have expressed to us, and that the board members and that staff, BHEC staff have with this new mandate. Nothing's been decided yet. There was a March 6th town hall meeting that the psych board held. A lot of people attended that, 120, 130 people attended that, I think. And there will be an April the 11th meeting where the psych board is actually going to be visiting in an open meeting with ASPPB representatives, including some of their board members. So if you're a psych board member, or excuse me, not a member, but if you're a psych board licensee and you're watching this, I'd strongly encourage you to watch that April 11th psychology board meeting. Or if you want to, you can come in person and watch it, but if it's going to be broadcast online. As soon as Diane gets the agenda ready, it'll be posted in the same place that they always are, and you can just go there and click on the link. But I really cannot stress enough, folks, that if you're in the psych world, you need to be paying attention to this issue. This is one of those watershed changes, just like, the North Carolina Dental Board case. Y'all have heard me talk about that. I nerd out on that all the time. The fact that BHEC was treated, these are all watershed moments. This is going to be a watershed moment in your profession if you're in psychology, so pay attention to it. The other professions, you might want to pay attention to it as well, because the questions and concerns raised about that exam could apply equally to your exams. So, everybody kind of needs to be watching it, but psych folks, you need to have both eyes on it, not just one. So again, join us for that meeting. You'll have a chance to do public comment if you want to say something or ask questions, and you get to watch the board actually interact. Sometimes it's just the board can't interact. They can only talk amongst themselves. This is going to be a little different. You're going to get to watch live interaction between the board and ASPPB on this one. So kind of be there or be square for that one. The next item up is going to be the workforce survey and data. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. The workforce survey has closed. We are now looking, I've got a small group right now. We're looking at the data, trying to figure out how can we improve the workforce survey. I'm about to call together the bigger work group that I have, and we're going to see what changes, if any, need to be made to that survey, and then when it needs to be redeployed. I don't want to burn you guys out on answering surveys. I know, like Robert and I, we're looking, you guys did a really good job on answering the customer service survey. You did a good job on answering the strat plan. I got to tell you, I am genuinely appreciative of how responsive this licensee population is whenever we send out surveys. It is incredibly annoying as a regulator when you ask for input and all you get is crickets in return. Thank you is all I can say for actually taking the time to read our emails and respond to the surveys. I know they're a pain in the butt, and it's okay to say that, but it's incredibly helpful whenever we're trying to figure out, well, which way do we need to steer this boat if we kind of know where the winds are blowing, from you guys. So thank you is all I can say, and just keep it up. Just make sure you answer those surveys so that we know which way, kind of what we're looking at, what the field looks like. Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you and Christina just to give quick updates on social work and counseling compacts.
So I'll go ahead and go first for the LPC counseling compact. So first of all, the compact did not pass, as everyone knows, in 2023 legislative session. The Texas board continues to support joining the compact, but we must wait for legislation to pass in Texas. The board and the agency cannot lobby for this, so this is where we need licensees and the associations to reach out to their local representatives and fight for this if this is something that you're wanting for Texas. Next session starts in January of 2025. So I believe associations are already starting to work on language. So if you're not a part of an association yet, that might be something you might want to do to join and support that. Currently, there are 32 states that have joined the counseling compact. There's one that is pending until July. It will become effective July. And then there's 12 that have pending legislation right now. You can sign up for the commission meetings. So you can just, it's counselingcompact.org, O-R-G. So counselingcompact.org. So I encourage everyone to visit the page, get familiar with it. There's lots of really good information on there, but at this time, Texas has not joined the counseling compact. We have to wait for legislation to pass in Texas.
So very similar to the counseling compact, the social work compact, the board cannot lobby the Texas legislature. It's up to individuals. I encourage you to talk to your legislators and your association for if you want the compact. The legislature would have to pass it. Currently, as of yesterday, a third state has passed the required legislation to join the compact. That was Utah joining South Dakota and Missouri. And as you can see on this map, the light blue states, there's about 25 or so, have legislation pending. The bill was not introduced in the Texas legislature the last session. It's up to a particular representative or a senator to sponsor such a bill and to get it through the appropriate committees. And so again, the democracy demands that you all participate if this is something that you want to have happen. Once 7 states enact the social work compact into law, then the compact can get on its feet and start setting up its processes. So it would take some time after that 7th state has joined the compact. And you can put in your web browser social work compact or social work interstate compact and easily find the website where they have all the information and the model language for the bill. And so when you talk to your representative or your senator, then you have information with which to bring them. That's it for the update.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Tim, you want to finish us off with those last 2 topics?
Let's see here, quick trip around the website for us. Let's see here, we've got to share our screen first though, Dummy. So from our website, this is the main page for the Behavioral Health Executive Council. Daryl was mentioning the survey he was talking about. If you go to agency news and scroll down, you can access that strategic planning survey if you want to do so, and we encourage you to do so indeed. Additionally, on our web pages up here, this is where you access your specific professional board. And we've added on our specific board pages the link to the how-to user guides. So these how-to user guides are available here. The user guides are broken down into sections. So if it's somewhat generic maintenance, it's going to be here, and then in the second section here. And then applying for a license gives you how to, upgrading a license, renewing a license. We will have we'll have a how-to for requesting to get your degree added if you don't already have it up there already. We already have it. So if you want to know how to apply for that, it's right here. And one thing Daryl wanted me to show was how to look up old rules. And so we have a how-to guide here, and let me go back to share screen. Stop there. And so when you open up that how-to, it's going to say how to look up old rules. And the fastest and easiest way is to look up the entire rule set, not to look up a particular rule itself. When you're looking up a particular rule, the instructions for that are at the bottom of this document. But in looking up a specific rule, you have to put in a lot more data to get to it. So I would not recommend using that function. Instead, when you click this link, it'll take you to the administrative codes search function. And from this, let's say you're wanting to look up a social work rule, you would put social work in between these percentage signs, which those are wildcard symbols. And then you click find, and it's going to bring you to a page that looks like this, which gives you the list of the social work rules in order. You will then click next if you need to go to something that's beyond this, that says that there's records that keep moving forward. So you click next to find what you're looking for. Let's say you're wanting to look at an old rule about supervision. So you click on this, and it will take you to the current rule. But it will also give you this link on the upper left-hand side here for the historical rules. Now this is where the old rules are buried. You click on that, and it will give you this list. This list, you'll have to look at it pretty closely, because you're going to look for the range in which your rule time frame that you're looking for. So if you're looking for something that happened in 2015, like this how-to was talking, that 2015 happened between 2013 and 2018. So you'll pick the oldest of those two, and that will show you the rule that was in effect at that time. So you click on the 2018, and it will take you straight there. One of the caveats to this particular search is if they actually change the number of the rule, like if they moved language from 781.404 and they moved it to 781.522 or something else, that makes it much more difficult, and you're going to have to find out about that some other way. There's just no easy way to look into that. But that's a much more rare occurrence. Typically, the rules stay in their same little batch here, and they get modified throughout time. This is the instructions on looking up a specific rule, and as you can see, you have to put in the title, the part number, the chapter number, all of this other garbage. And half the time when you do that, you still don't get it. So it's a very squirrely search. I really highly advise you to avoid it, because it has made me pull out hair on numerous cases. But that's what that looks like. What we would like to do is open this up for FAQs now and give you guys a chance to pepper us. And I'll hand it back to Daryl.
Yeah, one thing I would say on Tim does a lot of those, or he does all those how-to guides. And he puts a lot of time and effort in building those things. So I would really encourage everybody, before you email or call us with a question about where to find something on the website, check out the how-to guides and check out the FAQs, because we do a pretty good job of figuring out these are the common questions we're getting, and then we build those documents to answer that so that you don't have to call us. A lot of the stuff we answer is in those how-tos and the FAQs, if people would just look at them. The vast majority of what we answer is in those. So just use those resources. That's what they're there for. So with that being said, let's open this thing up for Q&A. So if you've got any questions, I don't see any callers, but if you got any questions, use the raise hand feature, and it'll be just like in the board meetings. We'll put you up here, except you don't have a 3-minute limit for public comment. All right, Mr. LeBleu or LeBeau. Joseph, there you go.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question about the new CEU rule. There's an extensive list where of providers who are circumscribed that we can use. Now I'm talking about the LPC rule for CEUs has recently been revamped, and but then at the very end of the rule, there's this what seems like kind of breathtaking exception, and it says that notwithstanding whatever has been said above, any CEU taken by a third party that was a part of a planned program will be accepted. And so I just wanted to be sure I understood it correctly, and that anybody who's offering CEUs as a third party, and they present a planned program, that's acceptable. And that's what I was asking.
Well, you're talking about, okay, I think what you're referring to is subsection H there. And what that H1, what that refers to is if you are the speaker at a continuing education program and you build, your presentation, and let's say it takes you 3 hours to put that thing together, or it takes 8 hours, whatever. If it takes you 3 hours, you get to claim 3 hours of continuing education credit for the effort that you put into building the continuing education program. If it takes you 8 hours, you get to claim a maximum of 5, even though it took you 8. That's what that says. And because your building it wasn't part of, it's not part of a continuing education program. You did that outside of it. We didn't want to cheat you out of the effort of putting it together. So that's what it's designed to do, is to kind of capture a lot of the effort that goes into putting together these programs. Because you're not sitting out in the audience, you don't get the benefit of hearing it, you don't get to claim credit for it, but you built the thing, so you ought to get credit for that. That's what that's designed to do.
Right. I'm asking about item number 4 that was on there, that paragraph number 4.
Oh, the
If I'm
self-study?
if I'm interpreting that correctly to be that if I study as a part of any program offered by any third party, I can go ahead and count all of those all that time.
Well, okay. Self-study is you reading a journal article.
Would you read that last sentence, sir?
Successful completion of a training course on the last sentence
Where
of
it says
before.
time spent individually reviewing, listening
Mhm.
to, and then it says as a part of an organized continuing education activity program from a third party
Right.
is not subject to the limitation and may count as acceptable hours under this rule.
Correct. That is meant to make clear that if you are watching a recording from a sanctioned CE program, that is not self-study. If that program says you get 15 hours for sitting through this video recording of CE program, then you get 15 hours. You're not limited to 1 hour. That is not self-study. You are not doing something on your own. You are following a pre-programmed course of continuing education. So you get the
Very
full
good.
credit.
Very good. Now,
Yeah.
what I just want to be sure why we both agree on also, I agree on that point. That makes sense to me, sir. I just want to be in agreement that therefore all of those all of those specifications for acceptability above do not apply. That it could be any third party's any third party's study program.
I'm not tracking you.
Well, if we go above, I don't have control over what the earlier part of the rule does is narrowly define what will be acceptable by item number. And it's got quite a few items that will be acceptable. And, and it requires, now, the language down in the bottom part of the rule says, notwithstanding any of that, and as we read down, it seems to indicate to me that any third party offering any program would be acceptable. And I wanted to ask if that interpretation is correct.
I don't think it is.
Daryl, if I could,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
what the Statutory Construction Act would say, it's that H is the exception to F.
Yep.
And the sentence there in 4 is an exception to H. And so as an exception to exception, it is not granting additional purview. So that what it's saying is self-study in 4 is an exception to the parameters of F. But if you are getting more hours that is through a third-party provider that is not self-study, therefore is not an exception within H, therefore must be subject to F.
Correct.
Okay, well, man, you made it hard to understand. All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. If we made it hard, our job, we did our job then, I guess. I'm
Well,
joking.
we went a long way from where it was in our judgment as professionals. We went a long way from there. Thank you.
You bet. Shay Alexander, do you have a question for us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
When I was renewing my license and read about trafficking, I used to run a nonprofit agency that dealt with sexual abuse and sexual assault. And it was really important for us and my staff to all know about trafficking victims and all that happened. Since I retired and have a private practice, I was thinking chances of someone like in private practice coming across a trafficking victim is small to none, because a pimp or a trafficking group is not going to pay and bring someone to a private practitioner for anxiety or depression, etc. And I found a lot of that was covered really did not apply to someone in private practice. And I was wondering, is there a possibility, because there were some exempt groups from having to take trafficking, is there a possibility that you would consider people in private practice to also be exempt from regularly taking, maybe every 5 years or so? But it just does not seem to be something that is necessarily useful to those of us in private practice.
Yeah, the short answer is no, because it's a statutory requirement. So the council, neither the council nor the board can exempt or carve out any subset or category of our licensees from that requirement.
I see.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
You bet. I just lowered the hand. Maria, I just lowered your hand on accident. You'll raise it again. There you are. All right, there you go. Maria, you got
Can you hear me?
a question for us? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you for taking my question again. This is the second time I raise more than a question, a concern that when I started, when I became a supervisor in 2004, we had a limit of how many supervisees we could supervise. The limit was 8. At the moment, there's no limit. And I would like for you to revisit that number. I don't know where you would get your data, because last time you asked me to get some data, but who's going to complain? The supervisee who's paying $30 an hour? No. The supervisor who's supervising 10, 20, 30 at the same time as a group? No. So I'm not going to get that data. But I would like for you to revisit as a supervisor since 2004 and someone who has taught the class for clinical supervision, the 40-hour class. I can assure you to give quality supervision so we can then in turn get the most out of supervision. We need to limit the number of supervisees we have, because if we meet with them individually, everybody works till 5 o'clock. We're gonna meet with them at 6 o'clock. So we can meet one 6 o'clock, a second one at 7 o'clock, and that's it for the day, right? So let's say I do decide to meet with them 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 days out of the week, that's already 10. How many of us are willing to do that? Therefore, the alternative would be meeting as a group, which, again, I cannot give you the data, but again, as a supervisor and someone who teaches the class, I would like for you to revisit that number.
Well, I will tell you, I hear what you're saying, but this is kind of the wrong audience for that one. None of us get a chance. We don't vote. We don't do that. What you're going to need to do is give public comment at a board meeting. You're going to need to come to the board meeting and give public comment and express your concerns and ask the board to revisit that issue.
Okay,
None of us can do that. Now, what I will say is if this is a concern that the licensee population has, that the supervisor population has, and y'all are seeing problems in this, you've always got the option to either approach your colleague and say, look, you're not living up to the ethical requirements of the profession. Alternatively, you've also got the option to file a complaint on them and say they are not providing adequate supervision. So that is an option. That is a check, if you will, or a public protection component of it. If you feel like that they are not providing adequate supervision, it's not all up to the supervisee. But I will say we do have supervisees file complaints on supervisors. That is not an unheard of thing. It happens more often than you think. But I get what you're saying. I do. I understand what you're saying. I will say this. We have not seen, like, I know psychology doesn't have a limit. Sarah, does MFT, do they have a limit on the number of supervisees?
They've just changed that rule. It used to be a specified limit of 12, and now it is a limit of the number of supervisees for whom you can provide adequate supervision. That's for MFT.
That's for MFT, but that was, Christina, that was the same thing we changed, or they changed at LPC though as well, wasn't it?
We haven't had a limit.
Oh, they
for
haven't
that
had
now.
one. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So my point being is we've got a bunch of boards that have never had that kind of a limit, and we haven't had the problems. We haven't had any of those types of problems, at least not that we can, we can identify. Now, I guess you could say they're out there. We just haven't been able to identify them yet. But
Mhm.
anyway, if that's something that you guys feel strongly about, then what I would encourage you to do is to come to the meetings or,
okay.
appear virtually and give public comment and express that and ask the board to revisit that issue.
That sounds like a great idea. I will take that path then because I feel very passionate about providing the best services and also in providing the best and adequate attention to each and every one of my associates because they are the product that will be sent out into the community and serve our children, our adolescents, and our families. And we need to raise the level of commitment and quality so that our mental health field as a whole can be elevated to those of other professions. I just feel sometimes that our profession is not, for example, we go to court and we are not treated as equals to attorneys at law. So I would like to see our expectations being raised, the quality above any other. And I would like for our profession to be above what we have right now.
Do you know, is there any kind of standard, what is taught in the supervisor training course about how to determine the appropriate number of supervisees? What's being taught to supervisors?
Right now, what I am teaching whoever takes my class is that my number for quality has been always 5. Now, as an example, some entities will set out bids for supervisors, right? To supervise so many 10, 20 associates. And the bids are out there. People, respond and they apply and they take 20, 30, as many as they can. But the quality is not there. Not if you take into consideration that we're supposed to meet with them individually 50% of the time. And the other 50 could be as as a group, which I can also see the benefit of that when I teach my class, which is modeled after Dr. Bernard, who is the author of one of the clinical supervision books. The discrimination model is the one that I use, and most of the universities who send their interns subscribe to the discrimination model. I don't know what others are teaching, but I always caution them, don't take more than 5 because the quality will not be there. Imagine you working from 8 to 5, seeing your intern 6 to 7, a second intern 7 to 8. Those are 2 interns, and according to your rules, 2 is equal to 1, right? 3 is already a group, but if you have 2, it's according to your rules, still 1. But in my head, 1 is 1, right? Not 2.
Yeah.
And so I caution everybody, but here in the area in South Texas, I'm one of 3 who is actively, the other 2 are teaching the class, but are not practitioners. So they teach theory, not practice. I am in private practice. Therefore, I teach theory and practice. Now, research says many things, right? But in the law is people making law are not in private practice. And I can say what I tell everybody, do not take more than 5 and 6, because to give quality, either teaching, consulting, counseling, as it is in the discrimination model, you can only handle 5 or 6. You
Yeah.
cannot handle 20 unless you're doing that full time. And even then, how many interns, how many supervisees will be able to meet with you at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock? It is not feasible. Time-wise,
Yeah.
it's not feasible to do that because everybody's working. Any LPC associate is working 40 hours. You're working 40 hours if you're a supervisor. And so the time that you dedicate to your associates is either in the evening or on Saturday. And that's it. Hopefully everybody's resting on Sunday. Therefore, if you do the math, imagine the quality of supervision that we will be able to give to someone if we take 20 or 10. And just
Yeah.
logically speaking, just
I understand.
logically.
Yeah.
And
Understand.
because I have a practice, I have seen clinicians who work here, and they tell me, oh, my supervisor was so and so. And there's a lot of damage control there. You have to teach from what is a SOAP, how to conceptualize a case, the difference between diagnosing and conceptualizing, the different models of conceptualizing, the different models of writing notes, what kind of, if you're private practice, you have to service from the 2-year-old to the 80-year-old, and how to use a treatment planner. There's so many issues involved, and I, as a supervisor, our main concern is not so much the supervisee, but the clients of the supervisee.
Yeah.
So how can we, if you have 10 supervisees and every supervisee has 30 clients, how can you possibly review 300 clients in 1 week? And the other thing, you say you meet
Let me
4 times.
kind of, can you kind of wrap up so we can, because I got one other person with a hand
Okay.
up. I want to make
And
sure we're not, excuse me,
and
my lights went off.
that is my main concern. And
Okay.
the second one is that you say meet 4 times a month. I always say meet every 40 hours that you work, which equals to the 4 times. But I thank you for giving me guidance in how to pursue my concern, and I'll try my best to visit your meetings and raise my concern there. I
Okay.
really appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you for attending and chiming in. Appreciate it. All right. Ms. Colburn? or Prado?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you all for your time. I have a question on the new rule change for 6A1.35 and for informed consent and client records for acting within the scope of employment with an agency. Excuse me, I'm out of breath. I'm signing an independent contractor contract with agencies within my private practice. Does that mean that it's okay for me not to get the client records in my EHR because they're keeping the records? And on the informed consent, that we need to get it in writing that we inform the client about all of the informed consent. Would that count as the informed consent given by the agency? How would you,
Let's break those questions up first so that we're
Okay.
only tackling one. So as far as the record retention, I think you need to, I think the rules is going to require those records be left with, I mean, you're the contractor, you said, you're an independent contractor.
yes, my private practice name is within the independent contract. So does that count as me being their employee? I think it does. I just wanted
Yeah,
to
well,
verify.
let's think about how, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for you to do work for them and then leave with all the records. And,
Correct.
you know, the patient, they do the billing for the patient, I'm assuming, and the patient's going to understand that that's where they went to see you, or that's through whom it doesn't make
Correct.
sense for you to have the records and not them.
Correct. That's what I thought.
Yeah, so they need to maintain the records, and that, you know, I don't know. I would be happy to let somebody else maintain and have control of those records so that I
Absolutely.
didn't have to deal with it.
Absolutely. And
Now,
within the informed consent, would that mean that, can I keep that informed consent with the agency? Because they will be signing all of the, from, all of the subsection A, all of those numbered requirements, I guess.
Mhm.
So would that count as that, or excuse me, do I have to keep, because it says you must document in writing that the licensee informed the client of the information required by subsection A. I would count that informed consent given by the agency because it usually contains all of these.
Yeah, I mean, if what we're kind of talking about here is when you're practicing in like a global or a large facility type setting, a hospital or a large clinic setting. You know, when you go into the hospital, you don't sign informed consents for the surgeon, for the nurse, for the anesthesia. You sign one set of informed consents, and it belongs to that hospital. It doesn't belong to the individual providers. The doctors oftentimes are not employees of the hospital. They, you know, they have privileges there, but they may be an outside physician. We're trying to kind of model y'all's rules after that too, because the rules had for a long time been focused more on kind of the individual clinician hanging out a shingle to practice. Well, that's not the way the practice looks anymore, or it's not totally that way. So we're trying to kind of adapt it for this new modern, the way things work in the modern world. So, I mean, if their informed consent covers all of that, you don't need to redo it.
Okay. Good to know.
Is really what that means. So, Christina, Tim, you tell me if you disagree.
I agree with you. Just make sure you're still responsible for making sure the client is aware of all of that information that's outlined under A and that they agree to it. And you have to document that in your records.
So that was my question. So on my EHR, I would have to add them and document kind of like a note that they agreed on all this, but I don't need to keep on that.
No, you do not need to keep. Yeah, as long as you just memorialize something, you know, discussed informed consent issues with patient, and that's memorialized in your notes, you're good. That's all that really means. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel and go through all of that again with them and then spell out each thing in your note. That's
Yeah.
not what that's intended to do. And if there is, I don't know, if there's one little change, let's say you have to do something, some sort of evaluation or assessment, or do something that you feel like was not covered in the original informed consent, then just memorialize that in your notes. And that, hey, we went over this with the patient, discussed the pros and
Mhm.
cons, all the benefits and the possible, problems, detractors with it, and patient was fine or client was fine to move forward with that. Just do that in your notes. You don't have to do a
Okay.
whole new informed consent. We're trying to make this more simple for you, and mimic how it actually plays out in the office, and not create, a bunch of forms to paper
Yeah.
your file, if you will.
That's very helpful. Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Does anybody else have any questions, comments? Daryl, you're a moron. You suck. Anything like that you want to say to me before we close this thing out? There we go.
A couple of Q&As are in process too.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you very much. This is a very beneficial service that you're providing, and I look forward to future meetings. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. All right. I guess we've got to clear out some stuff in the Q&A. Just a reminder, everybody, when you log off, or when we end this thing, you should get a little 3-question survey. Answer that for you. It's not mandatory, but I'd appreciate it if you would. And let me know what you want us to talk about in the future. If you want to mention something now, if there's something you want us to be working on in the future for our next one of these. How often do you want these? We're kind of planning on doing, I've been really remiss. I probably need to be doing this after every council meeting, but time is a very valuable commodity around here, and it gets away from us. So, how often do you want these? Would you like a more scaled down version on a more frequent basis? Say, just something that we don't give a presentation over. We just kind of make ourselves amenable to questions. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, think outside the box of what you want to see from us, and either tell us now or let us know in the survey, because you're not confined to just this format. If you've got something else you want to see, I'm just think outside the box. Yeah, Zoom user, do you have something you wanted to ask us?
Yeah, this is Tiffany. I had a student who was doing an upgrade after completing their hour, a social work student, that got a deficiency notice that said that he did not turn in his NPDB self-query report along with the application. In the beginning of this session, I thought I heard you say that those were something y'all were doing for audits, but the letter from the board says it's like part of licensure now. So is that
Yes.
Okay.
No, everybody who is applying for either an initial or an upgrade, you've got to submit an NPDB self-query report. But we're
Okay.
also being required now, if you are selected for audit, you also have to produce an NPD self-query report for us. So it's all three of those things: initials, upgrades, and the audits have to produce NPDB reports.
I appreciate that info, and I guess I would add that I helped and looked, and I didn't see that on the application on that particular part of the website. So maybe just check that.
Yeah,
Yes.
check our letter, we'll do that.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. All right, anybody else? We got one question. Looks like Robert's working on the answer in the Q&A. Sorry for the dead air, folks. We're just waiting on Mr. Romig there to finish it out. No pressure, Robert. Staff, is there anything you feel like we've missed that we should have mentioned?
I'm typing an answer in regard to the direct hours to couples and families for marriage and family therapists. I thought I had already sent it, but my Zoom
It die on you?
It died, and so
Okay.
that question came back. But basically the question is asking, would the rule include partial hospitalization group or an IOP group? And I'm writing back that the rule includes that individuals must share an ongoing relationship beyond that which occurs during the therapeutic experience itself. So I'm not sure how a partial hospitalization group, if they're only meeting for the group, for the therapy, if their only relationship is the therapy, then I don't see how that's an ongoing relationship. Whereas the examples that include an ongoing relationship is residential treatment or other situationally connected people. I think one of the examples during the discussion when the rule was proposed was it might be an incarcerated group, or some other relationship besides just the therapy. So I've sent the response, but I just wanted to get that
I
over
see
to
those.
there.
Yeah, your original one did come through, Sarah, because I see it in the Q&A responses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you bet. Hey, somebody's paying attention. They asked that question. That's a pretty intense, detailed question.
Daryl,
Okay.
we got one more hand up.
Oh, one more. I'm sorry. Miss McDonald, do you have a question for us?
Yes, hi. That was actually my question. So thank you for answering that and providing extra detail. This was a ongoing discussion with my supervisee, where we were debating what was considered a situational, ongoing relationship compared to the difference between residential or inpatient, because some of these PHP programs, which is redundant, I know, can be up to 10 weeks. So I guess my question was, what is considered ongoing outside of the therapeutic relationship, if we're comparing partial hospitalization to residential, because they're both treatment settings. And so that's what kind of confused me, was because in residential or inpatient, they're not going outside of that dynamic to have a relationship. They're captive, right? So if they are in partial hospitalization, they may still be seeing each other multiple times throughout the day. But maybe they met there, and most programs discourage continued relationships outside of that, at least the ones that I've been around. So that was kind of why the question came up, was what's the difference of the ongoing situation, I guess.
I will tell you, there is no way I can answer that as I sit here. I will
We stumped ya.
openly plead. Well, that ain't hard to do. You know, you don't get trophies for stumping me. I would have to really sit and ruminate on that one and get with Sarah, and I don't know. That's just it. I don't know.
Well, that's validating, because we didn't either. And so we were hoping that a group of people much smarter than us could have a very quick answer, but
Yeah,
this is
sorry.
validating.
Sorry. We'll have to all stumble through that one together.
Right. And maybe it is truly situational of, well, this group, goes on outings or something versus this one doesn't, or something
Yeah.
that might push past that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
my guess is we typically, I'll say this, we don't like our rules to be gotcha type rules or gotcha
Yeah.
type laws. We don't want to create like booby traps for people to stumble into, and then you're like,
Mhm.
damn, I'm caught. That's
Yeah.
not how the law is supposed to work.
Mhm.
So that, I would approach it from that angle right out of the
Okay.
gate, but I just don't know off the top of my head, because that's a pretty intense question you asked.
Okay.
Let us do some looking on that. We'll get back with you.
Sure. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Thank
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Dunmore, do you have a question for us?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, this is not as intense, I hope. I'm an LPC private practice, and when the word gets out at church that that's what I do, I get people approaching me to want to seek services, but I'm like, is that okay, or is that considered conflict of interest?
Off the top of my head, I'd have to pull the rule up.
Yeah, I looked it up and yeah, it's confusing.
Tim, Christina, if y'all know it off the top of my head, don't wait for me. Looks like D1 is D1 of that of 68138. Is that going to be the controlling rule for there?
Under D5, is it a personal friend or would it fall under anything like that? This person?
No, just a member.
I mean, I don't know that you could say you have a relationship with them just by virtue that you guys attend the same church.
Mhm.
Because I mean, if that's the way this rule is going to operate, okay, I'm thinking out loud now. So just y'all are we're just talking now. If that's the way that rule is going to operate, then we've basically got problems in every small town in Texas. You go in, I mean, hell, you go into the feed store, you're going to bump into 5 people you know. I'm not sure that's what that rule contemplates is just an acquaintance or a fellow parishioner or attendee at church.
It also lists on there, I believe it says like, work associates or something like that. So in that same vein, if just because you both have the same employer doesn't mean that you work together. You know, like I work for the state of Texas, it doesn't mean that anybody else working for the state of Texas is somebody that I know or is a work associate. So
Gotcha.
just because somebody goes to your church is, I mean, you could be going to one of those mega churches that has 10,000 people. I don't know. Now, if your church is 3 people, that might be a different story.
Gotcha. Okay.
I really don't think so, Debbie. I really don't think that's going to qualify as a non-therapeutic relationship.
Okay.
I guess if y'all start hanging out,
No.
then yeah, that changes the whole dynamic of it. But
Right.
tell them to sit way in the pew on the other side of the room over there, and just that way it's clear.
No eye contact.
I'm
Okay.
being COVID and I'll stay away.
Thank you guys so much.
You bet. All right. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Like I say, fill out your survey. Let us know what you want to see in the future, kind of the frequency of it, and we'll see if we can make it happen. But again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate everybody's time and attention. Y'all have a good afternoon.